Hi, I'm Jack Reynolds. I'm running for Texas House District 99. I'd like to talk just a moment about my opponent in this race, Charlie Guerin. He's the incumbent. He's been there 22 years. I'd like to tell you some of the reasons why he's not who you think he is. Number one, he's married to a lobbyist. Now, in 2015, he passed a bill, helped a bill get passed, that would place a cap on the amount of fees cities can charge telecommunications companies. This benefited AT&T greatly. AT&T had $1 million contract with his wife's lobbying firm. In 2017, in 2021, he pushed a bill through to allow restaurants to deliver and sell alcohol to go. Again, this benefited the Texas Restaurant Association, another client of his wife's. There's just two examples, and the list goes on from there. She's among the most powerful lobbyists in Austin. Capital Insight has her ranked as the well, I don't know where I lost my place there. Ranked as a Top Gun lobbyist. There's a host of reasons why you could argue that Charlie Guerin is not a Republican. And everybody has seen this. The Young Conservatives of Texas rank Guerin among the least conservative Republicans in the Texas House. Texas Value Action's Faith and Family Scorecard gives Charlie Guerin the lowest score of all Republicans in the House. Texans for Fiscal Responsibility gave Charlie Guerin a grade of F. Texas Right to Life rated Charlie Guerin as the third worst Republican on these issues. He also was labeled a pro-life fraud by that same organization, saying, quote, he failed the pro-life movement, prioritizing power over principle. He's also ranked as the fourth least conservative Republican in the Texas House by the Rice University professor Mark Jones. His work was published in the Texas Tribune recently. On contested bill, he votes with the Democrats about half the time. When it's along party lines, he typically sides with the Democrats about half the time. There was an ethics reform bill, HB 504. This was in 2017, right before he got married to the lobbyist. And in that bill, they wanted a cooling off period before ex-lawmakers could return to the Texas legislature as a lobbyist. Guerin replaced the bill. He literally substituted another bill. He reduced the punishment for legislators who misuse official information during the 2 years following their departure from office. He decreased the application of an existing ethics statute that prohibits the abuse of non-public information for personal gain. And he granted former lawmakers a lower penalty for violating the law, changing the violation from a third-degree felony to a misdemeanor. In an interview, he said, quote, you can say I gutted it if you want. That's how he thinks of ethics. And earlier this year, the National Association for Gun Rights opposed a bill that Charlie Guerin was introducing. It would classify issue-driven nonprofits, so-called 501c4s, as electioneering organizations. According to the president of Texas Gun Rights, quote, politicians in Austin clearly don't want their constituents to know what they are up to. That's Charlie Guerin's own bill right there. He supported he wants taxpayers to pay for electrical vehicle charging stations. It doesn't sound all that unreasonable, but recall that our grid is pretty much maxed out at this point, partly because we've transitioned so much of it to these alternative energies that aren't always reliable year-round, don't produce as much, don't give us enough to hold on to make it through the coldest and hottest times of the year sometimes. And so adding these electrical vehicle charging stations could really tax our grid. So that's a concern. He also voted in favor of funding a study for a mileage tax. And that's when they basically charge you a tax per mile. If they're going to have you transition to electric vehicles, they can no longer collect gas tax from you. This is their alternative for that. A mileage tax. They want to tax you for every mile you drive. and he's in favor of that, or at least he's in favor of using tax dollars to study that. So there was a bill passed that talked about giving funding to hospitals. Unfortunately, the bill had a loophole, and Representative Tinderholt offered an amendment to that bill. The amendment was, quote, "The Commission may not award a grant under the grant program to a children's hospital that provides services, medications, or procedures for transitioning a child's biological sex as determined by the sex organs, chromosomes, and endogenous profiles of the child." In other words, they did not want any money from the state going to hospitals that are engaging in these procedures where they transition children, minors, and they're doing gender-affirming care for minors. But the amendment was killed by a point of order. Everybody knew what that amendment did, and Charlie Guerin supported ending that amendment. Ultimately, they did put an amendment in the Senate bill that ultimately became law, but it doesn't do what everybody thinks it does. The amendment said a grant recipient may not use grant awarded under the grant program to provide treatments or procedures to a child that affirm the child's perception of his sex if that perception is inconsistent with their biological sex. That may sound like the same thing, but in fact it's not. Because if a hospital has this money they were going to be using for this stuff over here, and then they were going to take your grant money and use it to affirm this child, to do gender affirming care on these children, well, now they can't. So now all they're going to do is take this money and they're going to use that on the gender affirming care. So we're still subsidizing it either way. Is the grant money going directly to gender affirming care? No, it's just subsidizing gender affirming care now. And so they really didn't put anything in here to block that from happening. And I suspect the reason why is, again, because these huge hospitals can pay lobbyists to come in there and tell them, we don't want this bill to go through with that amendment in there. And Charlie Guerin was fine with getting that bill out of there. Carbon credits. He voted on... This was HB 4018, relating to the use of Parks and Wildlife Department land for carbon sequestration or similar ecosystem service projects. And it was HB 4018 provides the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department can work with private entities to generate carbon credits. This is Al Gore's The Inconvenient Truth of what, 06? This is writ large, and now it's in our house, and now they've codified it. The carbon credits is this idea that polluters can only are capped at how much they can do, and then they do the cap and trade stuff. But this is science is far from settled on this matter. There's questions not only over whether or not the veracity of climate change, but how bad is the climate change? And is it anthropomorphic? Is it human-caused climate change? So this issue is far from settled. There are a number of experts who contend that, yes, it is a problem, and it may very well be made worse by human beings, but it is not some existential crisis that requires us to make massive changes to our economic and social systems. So clearly he's okay with throwing in some Al Gore carbon credits into Texas. I mentioned that Texas Right to Life labeled him a pro-life fraud. This is just one of the many reasons why that is. So there was House Bill 5, also known as the Corporate Welfare Bill, you may recall. Well, there was an issue with that. And again, Representative Schaefer this time sought to amend this corporate welfare bill. And the amendment would prohibit an applicant from compensating or otherwise providing a monetary benefit to an employee, general contractor, or subcontractor in connection with an initial job, construction job, or required job relating to an activity that would constitute a criminal offense under the laws of the state. Well, since Roe v. Wade has been overturned, abortion is a violation of state law. And so he was just trying to close the loophole that meant that nobody would get any money from the state to do abortions. And there was no other reason. The Democrats figured this out. They a Republican by the name of Todd Hunter dutifully stood up, decided to reconsider the adoption. They had already adopted it. They had already voted on the amendment and said it was fine. But then he asked to have it reconsidered. Guerin voted in recognition of that to reconsider, and then it was essentially unadopted. So now we can have tax dollars go to fund abortion providers. Digital IDs in Texas. This is one of those areas that a lot of folks are concerned about. The potential for abuse. You already saw, we trusted them with FISA after 9/11. We now know the government, federal government, state government, cannot be trusted with this level of responsibility. They just can't be. It's nobody else's fault. They did this. They have abused the FISA warrant privileges to the point where now everybody knows they simply cannot be trusted. And now they're wanting to throw digital IDs in here too. Well, guess what? Charlie Guerin voted in favor of the issuance of digital identifications. So those are just a number of the reasons why Charlie Guerin is no longer fit to hold this office. He is not a Republican. He does not live in this district, and he's married to a lobbyist, which is causing all sorts of conflicts of interest for the work he's done. My name is Jack Reynolds, and I'm asking for your vote. Texas House District 99. Thank you.